Great, I think we're set to go. So, good afternoon, friends, and welcome to today's Grand Advent Wellness Series. And today we're going to focus on a very important topic. The topic is anxiety and how we can move beyond anxiety to live healthy, happy, productive lives. So, our speaker this afternoon is really a wonderful person. His name is Paul Ruffin. John has a passion for families and the home. He believes that anyone and everyone seeking help can find it. They just need to find someone to help them gain insight and perspective while providing tools that will assist them and those individuals in achieving maximum mental health. John believes that a well-trained counselor doesn't give advice, but challenges his clients or their client to see the full picture and range of their choices. Also gives them tools that will use to assist in reaching their goals and reaching full potential. So John is a licensed professional counselor. He has a master's in clinical psychology, and he's been in the field for over 20 years. And I won't list all of his personal accolades and accomplishments, and I'll just say that it has been a privilege to consider him a friend and a colleague throughout my life and career. So with that, welcome, John, and thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that, man. It's always hard to hear your own accolades, or you feel like you're at a funeral listening to how people are going to talk about you. But nah, you did a great job. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and get right into it, guys, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to share my screen. Wait for it to, there we go. Okay, so like Sean said, this is Moving Beyond Anxiety. And my name is John Ruffin. I'm a licensed professional counselor. And I'm also an actual supervisor. The S stands for Supervising Licensed Professional Counselor. So I supervise incoming counselors. Just a little bit about my background. We talked a little bit. I've been in the field since 2001. I'm currently in private practice. I've been married for 14 years with 3 children, so I've been through the paces. And for those who care, I am a third generation Adventist. So today we're going to talk about 3 things. What is anxiety? How does it impact my life? And how to move past it. I'm going to go through these next few slides to give you some general information. But if you see something that perks your interest and you want further discussion, please put it in the chat. We're taking note and we're going to answer your questions as you give them. So no question is too deep or too light. We want you to be able to use your real life scenarios if possible, so that we can give you tangible, real life solutions. All right, so as we go on, what is anxiety? Anxiety is defined as a feeling of worry, nervousness, uneasy, typically about the imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. Anxiety disorder is when a mental health disorder that is categorized by feelings of worry, anxiety, or fear that is strong enough to interfere with your daily activities. So the difference here is that you can have a momentary feeling of anxiety and it not be a disorder. We all have worry and we all experience fear about things that may happen or things that have happened. But when it starts to interrupt your daily life, then we start thinking of it as a disorder. So there's a process to anxiety. You have worry, you have fear, and with that combination, you experience what we call anxiety. So let's talk about what worry is. Worry is your ability to assess that there's a problem that exists in your life. It's being aware of a potential problem or danger or circumstance. A problem exists in time. At any time there is a difference between your current state or condition and the desired end state or condition. So, thinking about how we started 2020, New Year's Eve, if you can imagine New Year's Eve, it seems like a lifetime ago. We were sitting in our homes or we were out with our friends without a care in the world, and we were making New Year's resolutions, and we were looking towards the future, talking about how great 2020 was going to be. And so, who would have known within a short few months that we were going to be derailed and with no possible chance of going back to normal? So, our expected outcome or end of what we thought 2020 was going to be has changed dramatically. And that's why we recognize that this is a time where anxiety is going to be high. But that's just worry. Anxiety also needs fear. So fear is the ability to perceive the possible dangers that may come due to this circumstance. When we think about COVID-19, we recognize that this presents a true danger. At first, when we heard about it, a lot of people were skeptical about how dangerous it was. But there's not too many people who have not had some type of connection to someone who has been impacted by this COVID-19. I'm sure those who are on here has had loved ones who have been affected by it, maybe even have passed. And the reality is that this is a danger. And if you take other things in your life that have perceived danger to it, because you want to protect yourself, you're going to experience fear. So fear arises with the threat of harm, either physically, emotionally, or psychologically. Fear, it could be either real or imagined. While traditionally we consider fear negative, a negative emotion, fear actually serves as an important role of keeping us safe and also helping us to mobilize and use our coping mechanisms to protect us from danger. But as you know, when you see things that causes fear, your body starts to react. Even though is something that you should be paying attention to, your body reacts in many different ways. And I know one of our two biggest fears is the fear of snakes and the fear of heights. And I can only imagine that there's probably at least one or two of you seeing this picture starting to feel those combinations of fear, that worry and fear come into your heart. So now that we look at anxiety and we understand that anxiety is your body's physiological response to the combination of worry and fear. And when I say physiological, I mean that there is something going on internally, with the chemical makeup of your body. Your body is starting to respond to this worry and fear. Here's some common anxiety signs and symptoms that you need to be aware of. Number one, feeling nervous, restless, or tense. I remember a few years ago when The Passion of Christ, the movie came out. And I don't know if you guys remember that. It was really big amongst Christians. It was promoted very well. And I remember when Christians went out to go see it. I know me personally, when I went to go see it, I left the movie theater drained. I didn't realize how emotionally involved that movie was. And a lot of people that I polled and talked to during that time that saw that movie felt the same way, because we can, even without exerting physical energy, can tax our body emotionally in a way where our body can feel nervous, restless, and even intense. Having a sense of impending danger, panic, or doom might be a response to this worry and fear. Having an increased heart rate, breathing rapidly, sweating, trembling, feeling weak or tired, or trouble concentrating and thinking about anything other than the present worry. We call it being fixated on the problem. Now, these things in and of themselves serve as a warning system, but if they go unchecked, they can become a problem and cause you to become dysfunctional. So, how can anxiety impact me negatively or positively? So, one thing that anxiety can do is invoke our defense mechanisms. So, these are learned and instinctive responses that your body uses to defend itself from perceived danger. And I'm going to explain some of these because a lot of people haven't really heard of some of these defense mechanisms that I'm going to present. So I'm going to present a few of them. One is sublimation. Sublimation is when you take an unacceptable behavior and you turn it acceptable, because the task of changing this unacceptable behavior is harder or more difficult to you than just making it acceptable. I'll give you a good example. I was talking to a group of people and they had asked me this question: give me an example of what that may look like. And I said, participation awards. Nowadays, parents want their kids to always feel great, when they're playing sports, even if they lose. But that's not reality. In our reality, there's going to be winners and losers, and we have to learn how to deal with disappointment. But because we want to protect them, and because we don't want our kids to be on the losing side, we will supplement. We will say, okay, we're going to turn this unacceptable behavior or thing until we're going to make it acceptable. So losing's okay. We all win. The next one is humor. And not all of these are bad. Some of these are good. One of my defense mechanisms is humor. When I'm under pressure, I usually laugh a little or smile, because that helps me calm down and it makes me feel comfortable to lighten up the room. Anticipation, preparing yourself for what's about to come. Rationalization, trying to make sense of the perceived danger. Reaction formation. This is suppressing your true feelings. So I could be in a meeting with the big boss, and he could say something that really makes me upset. But instead of demonstrating or showing my anger, I'll smile and agree. We do that as a protection, a form of protection, because we understand that we're responsible for our actions, and our actions can also speak how we feel inside. So sometimes we will suppress our true feelings in order to protect ourselves from a negative response. We have identification. Try to not only understand the situation, but adapt to the situation. Displacement. And could be more of avoidance, or positioning yourself or minimizing the effects. Projection, which is putting your behavior on someone else. I used to run a camp for boys with behavioral problems, and a kid that would come in and all of a sudden calling all the other kids a punk. Like, oh man, you're a punk, you're weak, you're a punk, you're a punk. And I'll pull that kid to the side and I'll say, you're really scared, aren't you? And they'll break down because they'll say, yeah, how did you know? Because they thought they were putting on this big show as being a really strong individual. But in actuality, they were projecting their fears onto someone else. And that happens even in adults. I see adults all the time. They will project something onto other people, and they will say something about other people. Like, for example, in married couples. I'll see a married couple and one spouse will tell the other spouse, hey, I think you're cheating on me. And there's no examples, there's no evidence for them cheating, but they keep saying, hey, I think you're cheating on me. I think you're trying to cheat on me, or I think you're putting yourself in a position to cheat on me. And I usually will pull them to the side and say, have you cheated? Because usually they're projecting their own fears and insecurities on someone else. We have fantasy, which is seeing, completely ignoring reality and looking at life through rose glasses. And then we also have denial, just completely ignoring that the problem exists. So we wear many faces, but those faces don't always match what's really going on inside. And sometimes we are not aware of what's going on inside. Sometimes what we're feeling is so suppressed and so subconscious that we are not really in tune with it. And so we assume it's not there, but it still comes out in subtle ways. Anxiety can affect your ability to problem solve. When we are experiencing anxiety, we may fight against our ability to rationalize because it invokes our fight or flight syndrome. And so we become instinctive when we're dealing with problems, when we're at the height of our anxiety. Our brain can react instinctively without using logic. When we are experiencing anxiety, it's easy for us to bypass cognitive reasoning and engage in instinctive responses. All this is important for us to understand because having knowledge on what's going on inside of us can help us process what we need to do or how to move forward. So you think about some of the responses that happen when we are not thinking clearly. We spend too much money. We spend time doing aimless activities. We get angry with people. We might become depressed, or we might even do really silly behaviors because we are so focused on the issue that we can't think clearly, and we end up doing things that we normally wouldn't do. So anxiety can also cause hyperfocus. When we are experiencing anxiety, we may become fixated with the problems that are in front of us. Our brain will shift all of its mental resources to the problem if it perceives that the danger is imminent and will impact us. It's almost like how we are when we're about to get into a car accident. If you've ever been into a car accident, it's like life slows down. I mean, what happens in the blink of an eye seems to take minutes sometimes. And your body, you start to see everything in slow motion. You become super focused on what's in front of you, and your brain is starting to go, and you don't even recognize it 100 miles a minute, thinking about, okay, what can I do next? Or like a fighter who's getting ready for the fight. In their mind, their everything else has lost its importance. And the only thing now that's important is that battle that they're about to engage in. And so in their mind, they're running through the movements. They're running through their counter movements. They're running through how they want to see the fight to happen. And even though this can be a negative, the hyper focus can be seen as a negative, it can also be seen as a positive in these two different contrasts. So with all that information, I want to ask this question. I want to give insight. How do we move past all of that? How do we take all of that is being thrown at our body, coming from the inside and from the outside? How do we move past it so that we can find that peace? And so I want to give you some insight on how to do that. Number one, you want to identify rational versus irrational thoughts. Take time to explore why you feel the way you do. Ask questions. If someone got you angry, or if someone has you feeling emotional, you want to ask why. You want to ask it from multiple perspectives, not just your perspective, but try to see it from their side. A lot of people are afraid to do this because they feel like they're going to lose the momentum to deal with the issue. As a kid, when I was playing basketball with my friends and I was behind and they were winning, I would do a little trash talking. I would say, "Watch what I'm about to do," or some guys, they take their shirt off and they will take their headband off and they'll throw it. And what they're doing is that they're trying to get themselves energized so that they can complete the task in front of us. And we do that as adults. Sometimes we're faced with a situation that just seems uncomfortable or that seems like a task that's just too big or too much. And what we will do is we'll get ourselves energized, and we will take that anger and that frustration and we'll use that so that we can address the issue that's in front of us. That's why as parents, when we spank our kids, we usually spank them out of anger. If those people are still out there spanking kids, usually they're angry because they don't really want to spank their kids, but they need that energy to actually do it. Now there's some people who are just a whole nother story, but for the general population, we use that frustration and anger to give us energy to move forward. But in actuality, that sets us up to become impulsive and do things that we're going to regret later on. Real strength is being able to look at the totality of the situation to come up with a clear answer. And the way you do that is you don't assume that what you see is what you get. You want to be careful not to assume you know the situation before you even ask a question. Sometimes, and I talk to my clients, I'll say, make sure that you had an actual conversation, because we will have this conversation in our head about the situation before we ever really speak about the situation. And we will assume that everybody knows what you're thinking. And what that ends up doing is causing people to not understand where you're coming from. And then that causes frustration, hurt feelings, and then nothing gets done. Do your research. Facts matter. Keep your projected goal in mind. If you're going into a situation or if you're facing something in life that you know is going to cause you anxiety or is causing you anxiety, think about what your goal is. Imagine walking through the mall and being afraid of the public, being afraid of people, having social anxiety. And all of a sudden, you get to the store that you were going to buy the gift for your special loved one, and it was packed full of people. I'll tell my client, I'll say, okay, put in your mind, imagine what your goal is. Imagine how your loved one is going to appreciate that gift that you bought them. Keep that in your mind as you move forward. Keeping your projective goal in mind will help you face the object in front of you and help you move past it. Thinking outside of the box is also important. Anxious moments can be a great time for creativity. Even though these are some of the most scariest times, some of the most scariest times has borne out some of the most greatest moments, the greatest things in our lives. Even with this COVID-19, people are starting to reinvent themselves. People are opening up their own businesses. People are taking time out to spend time with their loved ones. They have more time at home than they ever before. Some people are looking at, their health and how to improve their health. People are thinking about their personal growth. Just you see, even statistically, with the work environment, it is reported that the stay at home, working from home, has been more productive in the professional realm than when people were working in the office. That's what the statistics are saying. And so we're starting to realize actually have a lot of good that's coming out of this, along with some of the bad. So even though you're in an anxious moment, don't cut off the fact that there might be something creative that can take place. Seek for new solutions to old problems. Bring in fresh new perspectives. Don't be afraid to allow the younger generation to cooperate or to partner with the older generation. And I know what people are thinking, and this is the reason why they don't do that, because they feel like their principles are going to have to change. But the truth is that change is inevitable. It's going to happen. But you don't have to change your principle in order to adapt to your environment. You can still be a loving, God-fearing person and accept people and their differences. You don't have to change who you are in order to adapt to the environment in front of you. Here's some anti-anxiety techniques, and I'm going to run through these and give you some brief examples. But once again, if you want more, if you want to ask some questions in the chat, I'll be more than willing to give you some more examples of anti-anxiety techniques. So one technique is the deep breathing exercise. We all have heard of this, whether it's on TV or whether you've been to counseling itself. But the premise here is the more that you get fresh oxygen and blood flow in your body, the more you can regulate your emotions. It is so true. In Eastern cultures, they know this very well. And it's starting to come into it's been in our Western culture for a while, but it's starting to gain a lot of traction. And being able to utilize deep breathing techniques, and there's hundreds of them out there. A real simple one is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, where you inhale for 3 seconds and then exhale for 3 seconds. And you do that a couple of times, and it does relax you, and it does help you to get good blood flow, and it helps you reduce some of the frustration that you're feeling. Another one is reframing. Now, reframing is an umbrella term for a lot of different things. One tool I use in reframing is called storytelling. You can find yourself having an anxious moment. You can find yourself having an anxious moment. Like, for example, I had a client who was telling me that they always have these moments where they feel like something negative is about to happen, and they just can't help but dwell on it. They can drive in their car, and all of a sudden they feel like they're going to have an accident, or they are sitting in their house and they feel like an airplane is going to crash through the house. And they're irrational, but they just can't stop focusing on it. And so one thing, I tell them to do is, tell yourself a story. You start off with the negative thing you're thinking. Yes, a plane is going to may crash into my house, but then you complete it in a positive way. But it missed me and my family, and everybody on the plane was saved. Now, I know that might sound silly, but what you do is you complete the unknown. The biggest thing to fear is your imagination. And if you don't keep your imagination in check, it'll run wild. But if you complete it yourself, then you don't leave it room to grow. Another one is group support. If you're feeling nervous, let's say going to a job interview, so you get a bunch of your friends and you say, hey, just sit in the car while I go in and do this interview, and that helps you feel better. Or group support dealing with a particular issue. In therapy, group support is one of the most powerful tools that we use, because you have the power of the group encouraging you to do better. And then correction of triggers. So we all know that sometimes we have unresolved emotional issues due to trauma, due to experiences that we've had in our lives that constantly make us makes that anxiety reoccur. And so this is something you want to do with a healthcare professional, someone who can help you untangle things that you've experienced in your past that will help you deal with you moving forward in your future. So let's talk a little bit about medication intervention. So what I just want to list is a few reasons why you want to add medication to your treatment. So one is when you can't control your emotions with normal, healthy lifestyle choices. You know, sometimes our anxiety is situational. You know, we haven't been paying our bills, we lost a job, we have made some poor choices. We've been through a bad breakup. It's situational. And with just simple changes in your life, that situation can ease. And so the anxiety should ease. But there's sometimes when it's not about the situation. Maybe the situation may trigger it, but your body has just developed an instinctive way of dealing with the environment and the stimulus in the environment. And those are times where medication is very appropriate. Another is when anxiety has life-threatening consequences. You know, I deal with people who have very severe panic attacks, to the point that they can be driving, and if they don't pull over, they're going to have an accident, or that they are becoming super hyperventilating, and it can really be a danger. And those are times where medication is appropriate. And another is when it's able to improve the quality of life. I'm working with several different people, and sometimes, you know, what we're doing is good, but it's not good enough. And they need an edge to help them maintain at the level that they need to perform. And medicine is appropriate for that. And I'm sure there's other times when medicine is appropriate, but I just wanted to kind of give you a couple of things of insight of when medication is appropriate. I would be remiss if I didn't look at the spiritual aspect of this. We also need to trust in a higher power. You know, in the counseling field, we're more and more realizing that it's just not your physical, mental, emotional, and social life that we have to consider, but we also have to consider your spiritual life. And the reason that is that if you're the only master of your domain, if there's no one above you that can impact your life, and only you are in control of it, and you can't control it yourself, then you have despair. But when you have God, and when you accept that there is a power bigger than you that can help you, aid you in changing your circumstances, then that gives you a comfort, a peace that can go beyond all understanding. I just want to leave you with a few scriptures that will encourage you when dealing with anxiety. The first one is 2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. 1 John 4:18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out all fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. In Philippians 4, 6, and 7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. Guys, I wanted to give you this quick synopsis of how to move past anxiety. I look forward to your questions as we go into our question and answer period.
John, that was really outstanding. That's fantastic. And if you don't mind, can you continue to share your screen so your last slide with your contact information is up?
Okay.
And in the meantime, so we have a number of really important questions, and I'm going to try to break them down into the organization of your lecture. So let's just approach a couple of these piece by piece. So first of all, how does anxiety affect sleep? For example, waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning, thinking about a problem, and feeling anxious. How do I move past that? And how do I get good sleep? And are the two connected to each other?
They are. And that's a great question. So a lot of the problem is what we go to bed with. Believe it or not, computers were actually mimicked based on how the brain processes. And if you have a computer that's on all day long and you never really turn it off, it'll start to slow down because it's built up so much back data in it that it's constantly making the brain works. And so what happens is during our day, we have all this unresolved issue conflicts. As conflicts go on, whether it happened that day or whether it happened a month ago or a lifetime ago. But if it's unresolved, it's always constantly playing in the background. So what happens is during sleep, especially during REM, this is your body's attempt to process unconscious thoughts. And so if you have unresolved conscious thoughts, your brain is going to start focusing. If you ever get a chance to remember a dream, maybe you're in that first stage of sleep or second stage of sleep, or coming out of REM, which is that fourth stage of sleep. Sometimes you might remember what you were dreaming about. And in that, you might say, man, my dream was crazy. It was all over the place. I could fly, I could jump, I could run. I was going from one scene to the other. Things didn't make sense. People were half horses and half people. I don't know what was going on. And what that is that you've picked up all this data that you just could not explain. And your brain is trying to use this dream state to actually download and discard all of that. So what happens to someone who's experiencing anxiety, whatever that anxiety is, most likely is going to come out during sleep. And as we sleep during our sleep period, we go through several transitions. I think we go through our 4 levels of sleep twice in a normal sleep pattern. And so anytime you hit that first level or coming out of that 4th level into that first level, and you become aware, it can cause you to wake up, especially if the fear and anxiety is heavy, something that is difficult to deal with. And so what I tell people who are having problems with sleep on that level is it's really good to do 2 things. Number one, of course, with the counselor, start resolving some of the conflicts that you have. But number 2, what's also helpful is a good routine at night that calms the mind. Be careful about overstimulating yourself at night. I would give myself, if I was having difficulty sleeping, at least an hour, maybe even 2, of reduced stimulation. So cell phones, TV, stressful events, I would reduce those before going to sleep, at least an hour. I would also introduce calming material like music, water, a heartbeat. You got the heartbeat monitors, um, light jazz or light Christian music, or in cancer wards they use just a person's voice reading scriptures or reading a loving story, because your body still can hear data while you sleep, and if you keep it calm, it'll help you stay relaxed. So I hope that answered your question, Sean.
Well, that's great. I have to say, for all of our attendees, there may be more questions coming through than we can answer during this session, but please feel free to send your questions through, and we're going to address as many of them as we can here during the time allotted. And if not, we'll put together another packet of information and send it out to you. We'll make sure your question gets answered one way or another. Okay, another question here, and you mentioned this really excellent list of anxiety symptoms, and you outlined this. How do I know if I'm in serious trouble? Like, the question specifically was, um, what is the first thing I should do when I'm experiencing any of these anxiety symptoms that you outlined, and how do I know if I need to see somebody for them?
So the key is, how is it interrupting your daily life? So if you're making goals and you're not reaching those goals or not even coming close to those goals, or you keep getting thrown off when you try to achieve those goals, or not even motivated to actually start the goals, there's a problem. You definitely need to go and seek guidance or help. Now, if you are in danger, like if you're having panic attacks or becoming paranoid or feeling like harming yourself, then you want to do something immediately. You're in danger, you're in a crisis zone. But for just everyday normal things you need to pay attention to is if it's disrupting your life. If you're not able, and a lot of people won't recognize this as anxiety or depression, they'll just think, oh, I'm being lazy or I'm just not motivated. But a lot of times, the lack of motivation or the lack of movement is due to a conflict that's going on inside of us. And so it's really important that you pay attention and don't just push it to the side. If you're not being productive and you want to be, or you should be, if you have opportunities in front of you that will pay off, but you just don't seem to put the energy into it to actually do it, or you wait till the last minute until you feel overwhelmed or pressured to do it, you really want to talk to somebody about why don't you're not more productive and more highly functional. And if you've lost interest in things that you used to love, you definitely want to check that out.
That's great. There's two questions related to that, and one of them is, you described something called hyperfocus, and the question was, why is hyperfocus a problem? Your description seems almost like it's a good thing.
Yeah, and it can be until that's all you focus on. So it's like the news, right? And when the president, we're always talking about the president. And so I'll have people who can't sleep at night, can't worry, because all day long they keep turning on the news. Like, they're watching the news at work. They're watching the news when they drive their car. They watch the news when they're at home with their family. They watch the news in bed before they go to sleep. The news has to go with them wherever they go. And even though it might be good to be super focused on something when you're trying to complete a goal, if you lose the ability to break away and enjoy and experience your life. That's why I tell clients, working too much could be a bad thing. Yeah, you might be productive at work, but are you balanced? There's other things in life that you have to consider, and are you letting those things go to the wayside in order to work? And it can happen to anyone, but so you have to be balanced. You have to constantly, mental health is not something that you achieve one day and then it goes away. It's something that is maintained for your life. You have to keep an equilibrium, and you have to keep those checks and balances so that you can perform at your optimal. So yes, super focus can be good for a short period of time, but it shouldn't be your overall life and overall goal to just be focused on one particular thing.
Excellent. John, I think your comment that sometimes losing the joy that you felt in experiences that you previously have enjoyed is a trigger, prompted this question, because we just got this question that sometimes I feel anxious, but other times I feel down. Is
Mhm.
this possible? What does this mean?
So anxious is more of the lines with anxiety. Down is going to be more of the lines of depression. And here's going to be the difference. So anxious is okay, I'm worried. I see something coming. I know it's coming. I don't know what exactly it is or how it's going to turn out. But I'm preparing myself. It's almost like I'm preparing myself. I'm tensing up. I'm preparing myself for it. Whereas being down is almost kind of like feeling defeated. It's like, okay, I was beat down, or I made a misstep, or oh man, this didn't turn out the way I wanted to. It's almost an after the experience, which we're all going to experience. We're going to experience that anxiousness and that down period. And I was just telling someone this the other day. Those things are normal and it's okay. And you need to remind yourself that you will have these moments. But you also need to remind yourself that as long as I don't give up, I'm okay. I can always learn from down moments, from disappointment, from bad situations. As long as it doesn't cause me to give up what I'm trying to accomplish, what I'm here for. And that's why when you have someone who can identify their purpose in their life, they're hard to stop. When you can identify where your value is in life, and that's what I work with a lot of my clients to really help them overcome depression and anxiety. I really focus more on where is their value. A lot of times people don't feel like they bring value to the table, or maybe they no longer have the same value that they used to have. And they lose their drive. And so, in order to reestablish that drive, I help them find their purpose. That's the first thing, because we can correct all the other problems if you feel like you have something worth fighting for.
Great. This question resonates with me. John, everyone has stress, right? Forget the fact that it's 2020. We always have stress. Um, how is anxiety different from stress? And how do you know which one you have?
So they're really synonymous. They're not really different in the format of what you experience. I think when really we look at the disorder aspect of it is when it starts to affect your life. So stress and anxiety are dealt with, in my opinion, in the same way. You have to identify where it's coming from. What is the stressor? What's causing the stress? And then what can you do about it? Because once you can eliminate the stress should go away.
Great answer. The there was a question here about you gave this description of irrational versus rational thoughts. What's an irrational thought? And can you give an example of a rational versus an irrational thought?
Sure. And sometimes they can be so close together that you don't recognize that thought is irrational. So I'll give you a good scenario that just happened not recently in a church setting, church event. So there was a church event, a couple of families who has been impacted by the COVID-19 and church being closed decided to hold, Sabbath school on the line. And a parent was worried about this and was concerned for the church, thought the church sanctioned it or whatever it may be. So the church, they called the church, called the pastor, caused a huge fuss, right? So these particular parents who were just really amongst themselves and saying, we tired of seeing our kids disconnected from the church and didn't really want it to be that big, really took offense to it. And they said, you know, in their mind, their worry was they're being picked on. Everyone's against me, including the church. The church is against me. Now, on the surface, you might say, oh, that's a rational thought. But as a counselor, I would challenge that. I would say, you know, that's irrational. The church is against you. You're a tithe paying member. Why would the church be against you? You know, and even if you wasn't, you're a soul to be won. Why would the church be against you? Is it really the church is against you, or maybe the church has a concern that you need to listen to, or maybe they need to voice? And if you look at that differently, you look at the difference in perspective, you can resolve the church might have a concern that they need to voice versus the church is against me. The church is against me is irrational. One reason it's irrational is because it has the notion that, you know, this is already a set determined situation and you already know how it is before any facts are given.
That's great.
You get what I'm saying? And the second is irrational because it's an all or nothing statement. You said the church. It was two people. You know, the church includes, you know, the conference, the GC, and the global church itself. So we want to be careful. The way you know something is irrational is you have to question, does it really pass the snuff test and make sense how you say it, even though it might feel right? Is it logical?
That's great. In the last 6 minutes, I want to slide in two more questions. One is a pair of questions and one's a specific.
Okay.
The pair of questions are, if I start to take medication, will I always need it? And I want to pair that together. If I begin therapy sessions, will I always need it?
Man, great question. So, okay, so I'm gonna answer this from a therapeutic point of view, not a medical doctor point of view. Okay. So there are times where people take medicine and need to manage their disorder because their disorder isn't going to change. And those are in your more severe cases. Outside of that, your typical everyday mental health, you know, axis, I call it axis one disorder. So that's your, you know, anxieties, depressions, and so forth. They can be managed to the point that medicine is no longer necessary. You want to do that under the guidance of a medical physician along with your counselor. Also with counseling, you know, we are no longer in the Freudian days where you are in counseling for the rest of your life. Even insurances give us a set number of sessions and a certain number of times we can meet for a particular problem. So I want to answer that one two different ways. Number one, you shouldn't have the same problem for years if you're going to counseling. Those problems should be resolved. However, I do believe you should keep a therapist or a counselor on speed dial. I think you need to have someone who can have a non-biased opinion. We're not just here for critical mental health issues, but it's very good for those who are highly functional, who wants to problem solve and deal with issues before they become a problem. And so you want to always have goals that you want to reach. And it's always good to have a counselor, someone that's in the profession that can help you develop those goals and stay functional and achieve those goals as you go along. It can be very beneficial.
Great. Let's answer one more really practical question for us before we close out. How do I find the right health professional? There's
Awesome.
just all sorts of opportunities out there and people. How do I find the right one for me?
That is important, a great question as well, because personality matters. You want someone who can connect with you in a way that you can resonate with. You don't want someone who's going to pamper you, who's not going to tell you the truth, but you do want someone who can understand you, and that definitely is a personality issue that you have to consider. So here's what I would do. First of all, if they're licensed, they should have the same training or similar training as other counselors. So you definitely want to make sure that they're licensed, and that their license is in good standing and that they haven't had any ethical violations. And you can check that with your state board. You can go to your state board of counseling, and each state has one, and they'll keep record of any ethical violations that that counselor may have. And so the counselor should be able to give you their license number and for you to check that. And that should be posted on a website. However, there are good search engines that look for counselors, one being Psychology Today. Psychologytoday.com is a great resource when you're just trying to fill out therapists in your area. You can put in your zip code or a zip code that you want to uh, seek counseling from, and you can read the profile of every counselor. Every counselor in that area should be listed on Psychology Today. That's the first thing that we do, even before we develop our own website. And you can look a little bit about that person. Sometimes they have reviews, sometimes they post pictures, they do videos. It's a good platform to start to follow that person, so that you can kind of get to know them and get a feel of who they are. That's psychologytoday.com. I would encourage everyone to start there. But even with that, it's not perfect. You might see someone that you think may resonate with you, but it turns out that they're not a good fit. And what I would do is I would be I wouldn't allow myself to get stuck just because I went to them first. If it doesn't work, and if they're trained well, they'll be okay with you saying, "Hey, this isn't working. I've tried to work with you, but we just don't seem to mesh, and I'm going to change therapists." I think in the beginning it's appropriate. So in the beginning, you want to find what works, and that's okay. Sometimes it's a hit and miss, but it's okay. And there's a lot of therapists out there, so you're not going to run out of options. But once you find one, you want to stick with them, because there is value in the information and the rapport that you guys build. So you want to make sure you try to keep that relationship going, because once you start building, it's like a real relationship. You've put a lot of investment into it, and it's beneficial to try to hold on and keep that if it's a healthy connection and there's no ethical violations.
Great. Thank you. Well, Grand Advent family, we've reached the end of today's session. Thank you each for tuning in. Thank you all for tuning in. And John, thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. I can't thank you enough. Family, if we didn't get to your question today, I promise we'll send it to you. Okay, and we also have John's contact information. It's been on the screen, and we can share it with you as well. And your health and wellness team is always here for you as well as the pastoral staff. Let's end with Philippians 4, which John shared with us, and it reads, "Do not be anxious about anything, but everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your mind in Jesus Christ."
Amen.
Remember, you are not alone. We're here for you. Reach out to us if we can be of any service. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, John.
Thank
Well,
you.